Brisbane's Olympic Precinct finally has a master plan, but some of its most important connections may not be ready for the Games, and we still don't know what the wider transformation will cost. Public housing evictions have more than tripled, while new data identifies almost 1,000 Brisbane families experiencing homelessness in a single year. And in Redland City, a leaked internal review has raised serious questions about decades of investment in water and wastewater infrastructure. We'll also look at Brisbane's ferry dispute, Airtrain's multimillion-dollar court action, unexpected rates increases for unit owners, and the tree branch that injured a woman and young boy at Guyatt Park. I'm Adam, and this is the Brisbane Channel, keeping you up to date with everything shaping Greater Brisbane. This is a slightly longer update because some important distinctions would be lost if we reduced these stories just to their headlines. So grab a coffee, scotch, or whatever your beverage of choice is, settle in, and let's get updated. Thanks to channel sponsors Excel Psychology and YB Painting Services, along with channel members whose support has made this video possible. Before we get going, I'll let you know that I have 5 double passes to see Ice Cream Man currently screening in cinemas across Greater Brisbane, and I'll have those details toward the end of the video. Let's begin with the draft legacy plan for the Victoria Park precinct. This brings the proposed Brisbane Stadium, National Aquatic Centre, Brisbane Showgrounds, Athletes Village and surrounding parkland into one wider precinct vision. The stadium would sit near the centre of Victoria Park with an athletics warm-up track to its southeast. Existing cricket facilities would make way for an expanded Yorks Hollow with new wetlands, an urban forest, open lawns, walking and cycling routes, and community recreation spaces. The government says approximately 2/3 of Victoria Park will remain publicly accessible green space. 2 pedestrian bridges are shown crossing the inner city bypass, linking the stadium with the Aquatic Centre, Spring Hill, the Showgrounds and Exhibition Station. But Deputy Premier Jared Blay says further advice will determine whether both bridges are actually required before 2032. The wider park transformation also has no overall price tag and sits outside the existing $7.1 billion funding envelope for the Games venues. Premier David Crisafulli says some elements will be finished before the Games, while others will be delivered over many years. Vehicle access is another unresolved detail. The plan doesn't explain how trucks, emergency vehicles and event equipment would reach the 63,000-seat stadium. The Deputy Premier has acknowledged that new traffic ramps through Victoria Park may be needed, with details to follow after consultation. That has renewed concerns about congestion near the Royal Brisbane and Women's Hospital. Geica says early works will not change hospital access, and it will work with Metro North Health to protect patient and emergency vehicle movements. There's also uncertainty around Exhibition Station. Exhibition Station is supposed to help disperse spectators arriving at and leaving the stadium, aquatic centre and showgrounds. But part of the Athletes Village is planned above the railway corridor, potentially placing passing trains and the station within the village's secure perimeter. The government wants the station to remain open and is discussing the issue with police and the International Olympic Committee, but no final determination has been made. That matters because Exhibition Station is central to the government's plan to disperse spectators across several stations, busways, walking routes, taxis and ride shares, rather than building another station immediately beside the stadium. Public consultation closes on September the 27th, with the final legacy plan expected in 2027. Save Victoria Park argues consultation is largely symbolic because the stadium location has already been decided, and says artists' impressions understate the hard surfaces and vegetation loss likely around a major stadium. We asked the Department of State Development and Geica about delivery before 2032, access, crowd movements and costings. The department acknowledged the inquiry, but no substantive answers had arrived by our deadline. We'll keep you updated if those responses come in. We do know more about the Brisbane Showgrounds redevelopment. Hutchinson Builders has been awarded the $287.5 million project, including a rebuilt 20,000-seat main arena, Machinery Hill grandstand, horse pavilion and accessibility improvements. Work is expected to begin after this year's ECA and finish in 2028. The Ekka will continue throughout construction but will not operate in 2032 when the showgrounds form part of the Athletes' Village. The arena itself is not a games competition venue and has no permanent sporting tenant secured. The RNA says it will be flexible enough to potentially host sports such as cricket or AFL alongside the Ekka and special events. The redevelopment will come from the state's separate $3.5 billion Athletes' Village allocation. So the draft gives us a much clearer visual picture of the future Victoria Park precinct, despite being more representative at this point than final designs. What it doesn't yet establish is the full cost, which connections will exist by 2032, whether exhibition station can operate during the games, or exactly how vehicles will reach the stadium. A quick thanks to channel sponsor Excel Psychology. If you need support with things like anxiety, depression, managing ADHD, or relationship challenges, you should consider contacting Excel. They're a warm and inclusive psychology practice based in Spring Hill, just a short walk from Central Station. They've got a diverse team of clinical and registered psychologists, and they focus on matching you with the right person for your needs, often with relatively short wait times. They also offer Medicare rebates with the mental health treatment plan and support for work cover and NDIS participants. If you'd like to find out more, you can scan the QR code on screen or check out the link in the description. From plans for Brisbane's future to people struggling to find somewhere safe to live now. Last week, we mentioned that 122 Queensland households lost their public housing through the antisocial behaviour eviction process in 2025-26, more than 3 times the 39 households evicted the previous year. A further 91 households reportedly left after receiving notices, but before their cases reached the Queensland Civil and Administrative Tribunal. The households taken through the eviction process included 112 children or other dependents. The policy allows a tenancy to be ended after 3 confirmed incidents of nuisance or serious antisocial behaviour within 12 months, while dangerous or severe conduct can prompt immediate action. Mitigating factors including mental illness, disability, and domestic violence can be considered. There is a legitimate public interest in protecting neighbours from threatening or dangerous behaviour, but eviction doesn't make a household's needs disappear, it changes where those needs present themselves. That's why we asked the Housing Department what happens after these tenancies end. The department confirmed that it doesn't track what happens to the households afterwards. It has also confirmed that people evicted under the policy cannot receive accommodation through the Immediate Housing Response Program during their exclusion period, 12 months for serious antisocial behaviour and 2 years for dangerous or severe conduct. They can still approach homelessness services and access outreach, bond loans, rental grants, and Rent Connect, but those measures are not the same as emergency accommodation, particularly for families unable to secure a private rental. The department says its priority is moving people from temporary hotels into longer-term housing. It says 3,252 IHR households obtained what it calls a housing solution during 2025-26, many through social or community housing, although it didn't provide a complete breakdown. The number of households in IHR fell from 2,150 in March last year to 1,237 at the end of June, including 388 in Brisbane City. The government says this reflects movement into longer-term housing. Q Shelter questions whether lower hotel use proves the overall need has fallen. IHR receives $100 million this year. That's below what providers had after last year's temporary top-up, but above the program's original allocations for both of the previous 2 years. So it's not a simple cut to the original baseline, although organisations that expanded with temporary funding may still have fewer resources than last year. The government separately points to a $450 million boost for broader homelessness and crisis services. Q Shelter says providers are still assessing the changes and wants greater investment in supportive housing and teams that help vulnerable people sustain tenancies before eviction occurs. Q Shelter also says Queensland needs a more reliable way to measure demand before falling hotel numbers are treated as evidence that need has reduced. New Brisbane Zero data illustrates the scale of that need. Its by name list identified 984 Brisbane families experiencing homelessness during the year to June, including 1,539 children. Women were the sole parent in 715 families, and 321 families reported experiencing homelessness for the first time. During the same year, 318 families were housed, 41% in social housing and 35% in private rentals. Although vacancies increased across parts of regional Queensland, Greater Brisbane's vacancy rate remained unchanged at just 0.8%. Brisbane City remained at 1%, Logan at 0.8%, Ipswich and the city of Moreton Bay at 0.7%, and the Redlands at just 0.5%. The government has increased broader homelessness funding and says thousands of households have moved from hotels into housing, but it doesn't track the outcomes of households evicted from public housing, even though some were excluded from IHR accommodation for 2 years. Without that information, we can't tell how many secure another home and how many simply move into other parts of an already strained homelessness system. Now to 2 disputes involving Brisbane's public transport network. Brisbane's ferries stopped for 2 hours on Friday morning for a second week in a row as unions negotiate a new enterprise agreement with River City Ferries. The unions say 95% of participating members rejected the previous offer. They argue it would not keep pace with inflation and have raised concerns about fatigue and work-life balance. River City Ferries says it has negotiated since October and remains committed to a fair and financially sustainable agreement while criticising disruption to passengers. The first stoppage also exposed a communication failure. The union says the operator had 4 days' notice, but TransLink's website, app and journey planner showed ferries running normally until less than 24 hours beforehand. Notice of the second strike came almost 3 days in advance. Brisbane Labor called on Lord Mayor Adrian Schrinner to intervene, but crews are employed by Brisbane City Ferries and the formal bargaining process is between the operator, employees and unions. We approached River City Ferries and the Maritime Union for further detail. Neither had responded by our deadline and no resolution has been announced. Airtrain has meanwhile launched Supreme Court action against the Queensland Government, claiming more than $6 million under its contract because of 50-cent fares. Airport stations are excluded from the flat fare, but passengers travelling between the airport and suburban or Gold Coast stations also use the public network. Airtrain argues the state must compensate it for the reduced revenue from that portion of each through journey. Its parent company reported $4.75 million in unpaid invoices to March, while the court claim reportedly extends to $6.16 million through June. The state has indicated it will defend the action and says it remains committed to its contractual obligations. Airtrain's private concession runs until 2036, when the infrastructure is due to transfer to public ownership. The court must now determine how that decades-old agreement applies after fares on the connecting public transport network were reduced to 50 cents. Now to Brisbane City Council, which says its legacy plan will unlock an estimated 50,000 new homes by 2032, particularly near high-frequency public transport and inner-city venues. Council's housing tracker records just over 72,000 additional rateable homes since the end of 2016. But that's a different measure. Council has not defined whether an unlocked home means a planning capacity, an approval, or a completed dwelling. The important test will therefore be how Council defines the target and how many homes are ultimately built. Council can change zoning and development rules, but the private sector delivers approximately 96% of Brisbane homes, and approvals don't always guarantee construction. The target contains no mandatory share for social or affordable housing. The Lord Mayor says those homes remain primarily a state and federal responsibility, while Council supports them by waiving infrastructure charges. The new housing tracker should help assess progress, but the key measure must be homes actually added, not merely approved. While Council is encouraging apartment living, some unit owners have received much larger increases than the headline figure promoted in the budget. Council announced an average household increase of 3.97% and a cap of 7.5%. It later clarified that 3.97% applied to owner-occupied freestanding houses, while the cap does not cover properties paying the minimum general rate. For owner-occupied units, that minimum annual rate increased from $998 to $1,138, just over 14%. Council says Brisbane rates remain comparatively low and individual bills can also reflect property valuations. Labor says the headline presentation was misleading for around 180,000 unit and townhouse households. The issue is not that every property must receive the same increase, it's whether describing 3.97% as the household average gave apartment owners a reasonable idea of what their bills would do. A separate council issue emerged after a large branch fell on a woman and young boy at Guyatt Park in St Lucia on July the 29th. Both were taken to hospital in a stable condition. Council identified the tree as a forest red gum. It says the tree was assessed as structurally sound during an inspection in March and remained healthy when inspected after the incident. The branch broke partway along its length rather than at the trunk. Council says healthy trees can occasionally shed branches without visible warning, although the precise cause remains under investigation. Other trees in the park were inspected and no urgent problems were identified. Brisbane Labor questioned Council's tree maintenance workforce, claiming it had one arboriculture apprentice and no horticulture apprentices. Council confirmed one arboriculture apprentice, but says it has 2 horticulture apprentices, 77 qualified arborists and 159 qualified horticulturists, with contractors used when required. Council also rejected Labor's claim that tree and park maintenance funding had been cut. It says a change to how corporate overheads are allocated means this year's published program figure cannot be directly compared with last year's. On what Council describes as a like-for-like basis, funding across the relevant programs has increased from approximately $103.1 million to $108.2 million. We asked whether any earlier reports or service requests concerned this tree. Council didn't answer that part, so it remains unclear whether previous concerns had been raised. A quick thanks to channel sponsor YB Painting Services. If you're planning on updating your home or workplace, you'll be happy for the discount being offered by YB. The multi-award winning team offer fixed pricing and a 5-year warranty on their work, so you know exactly what you're getting up front. You can claim your exclusive 10% discount by scanning the QR code on screen or through the link in the description. In Redland City, an internal review has raised questions about investment in aging water and wastewater infrastructure. The report was commissioned by Council in 2025 and prepared by Create Advisory. It's not been published, but the Council confirmed the documents obtained by Brisbane Times were genuine internal material. According to the newspaper, the review found that expenditure and capital projects had been constrained to support Council's wider financial position. City Water spent around $14 million of a $27 million capital budget in 2024-25. A separate report reportedly estimated that $55 million would be needed for sewage infrastructure over the next 5 years, after only $5 million was spent during the previous 5. Council had also been taking 80% of City Water's profits as dividends, reaching $16 million in 2021. The leaked material reportedly showed that only 4% of hydrants due for 5-yearly inspections were checked in one financial year, while 4 wastewater treatment plants were at or beyond planned capacity, including Cleveland near the proposed 8,000-home Southern Thornlands development. Council says 1,350 hydrants have been refurbished since February. It also says the review found no evidence of system failure, drinking water remains safe, and its historically lower spending partly reflects a younger asset base. However, Council acknowledges that investment, staffing, planning, and governance need strengthening. It has budgeted $25.8 million for capital works this year and is adding 24 City Water positions. Council also wants the state to fully fund infrastructure required for Southern Thornlands without passing the cost to existing ratepayers. Following the coverage, Council published a Get the Facts statement, but didn't attach the review or directly answer several reported findings. We asked whether the report and presentation would be released. Council said the documents are confidential and will not be publicly released. There's no suggestion that water in the Redlands is currently unsafe. The question is whether investment has kept pace with the network's future needs and what it may now cost ratepayers to catch up. The pressures created by growth are also visible in Brighton, where residents are opposing the scale of a proposed retirement and residential care village. LDK Healthcare's Baybrook development would include independent living, higher-level care and facilities including restaurants, a theatre and pharmacy. The original application proposed 155 units across buildings up to 7 stories with around 300 car parks. Council advised that the height exceeded a 4-storey acceptable outcome for development adjoining low-rise homes. That's not an absolute legal limit under Queensland's performance-based planning system, but the difference is substantial. After flood concerns led the developer to remove its basement, the revised first building increased to 8 stories. The proposal now contains 148 units and 217 car parks. Residents say they support aged care, but object to the scale, overlooking traffic and possible pressure on stormwater and sewerage systems. LDK says the project addresses a serious shortage of seniors accommodation, has been designed to minimise impacts and will comply with the final approval. Council is still assessing the application. If you value local reporting that follows up on the unanswered questions, not just the original announcements, you can help support the channel by becoming a member or making a one-off contribution through Buy Me a Coffee. The links are in the description and here, and every contribution helps me put more time into researching stories like these. Let's finish with a quick trip around Greater Brisbane before the movie ticket giveaway. In Logan, Anglicare will open a $14 million supported housing service in September for people aged 16 to 25 who are homeless or at serious risk. It includes 24 studios and 6 one-bedroom units with support to reconnect residents with education, employment and longer-term housing. In Ipswich, community organisations are supporting a proposal for an overnight shelter bus, similar to services operating elsewhere in Queensland. It remains an unfunded proposal and is intended as a safer short-term accommodation, not a replacement for permanent housing. In the city of Moreton Bay, North Pine Dam is to return to full operating capacity under a $545 million program that also includes Lake MacDonald Dam. North Pine is currently limited to 54% while strengthening continues. Returning to full capacity would provide room for another 99,404 megalitres of water. At Lyndham, underground cables are being relocated ahead of the $105 million level crossing upgrade. The project will realign the crossing and intersection, but major construction is not expected until mid-2027. The state's Zero Litter to the Bay program will fund 276 new stormwater filtration devices and 276 upgrades across 6 council areas. The Environment Department told the Channel Ipswich was eligible but didn't apply, after which the Gold Coast was invited. The government estimates the devices will stop the equivalent of 6,000 wheelie bins of litter reaching Moreton Bay each year. Brisbane Airport has donated more than 15,600 unopened personal care products surrendered at international security during the past year. The 7.8 tonnes of products went to Guyatt and were distributed through 25 charities instead of going to landfill. And the Story Bridge Adventure Climb has launched a swing approximately 80 metres above the city. It follows last year's wheelchair-accessible bridge climb launch and can currently be added to a climb for $60. I'll be speaking with John Sharp, the man behind both experiences, for an upcoming podcast. We'll also discuss his funded plans for a wheelchair-accessible flying fox across the Brisbane River and his broader ideas for new visitor experiences. And finally, a few developing stories on my radar. The Queensland Government is considering a police union proposal to allow officers to collect DNA from child suspects without first obtaining a court order, along with possible changes to the state's vehicle pursuit policy. No detailed proposal has been released, so the eventual safeguards will be important. Gold Coast Deputy Mayor Mark Hamill has proposed extending Brisbane's southeast busway to meet the Coomera connector and continue towards Helensvale. That remains a long-term council vision rather than a funded state project. The government has also released a new Queensland housing code and changes to accessibility and energy efficiency standards. Those reforms deserve a closer examination than there was time to give them this week, so we'll return to them later. Now for the movie ticket giveaway. In Ice Cream Man, an idyllic summer town descends into madness when an ice cream man serves kids sweet delights with horrifying results. It's in cinemas now, and I have 5 double passes to give away. To enter, visit thebrizzychannel.com/win and follow the link. You can also watch the official trailer there. If you're a channel member, let me know your username for an extra entry in the draw. As it's in cinemas already, this will be a quick competition. I'll draw the winners at midday on Tuesday the 11th. On Thursday, I'll be sitting down for a chat with John J.C. Collins, Queensland's Nightlife Economy Commissioner, about how Greater Brisbane can be given a new lease on life after dark. So keep an eye out for that podcast coming soon. YouTube recommends you check out this video next. And that's it from me, because we're done.